Good evening. I'm Brad Travis. Tonight, you're in for a real treat. This year, WAFF 48 celebrates its 50th anniversary. We kick the party off right here tonight by talking about the last 50 years of weather. Now, 50 years ago, my parents hadn't even started dating yet. So for this special program this evening, we've rounded up some of the most popular weathercasters of the last 5 decades. And wow, do they have some stories to tell. So tonight, we're going up close and personal with the weathercasters you remember and love. Also tonight, we're going to be looking back at some incredible advances in weather technology. The weather forecasting tools of yesteryear were so primitive, they may seem funny today. But as always, when you're talking about the weather, Mother Nature is the big star. Tonight we've rounded up old pictures, scrapbooks, and film, basically everything we could find to tell you about the wildest weather that's happened here in the heart of the valley over the last 50 years. Blizzards, floods, and tornadoes, we've seen just about everything here in the heart of the valley, and we're going to give you a chance to relive those events that shook our world. So sit back and join us tonight for Mother Nature's version of reality TV. You do need to be seeking shelter. The number one killer out there, flash flooding, so do not go inside.
I don't think this is over yet, though. I would not let the guard down here.
The number of tornado touchdowns that we did with the fewer number.
WAFF 48, 50 years of weather. Brought to you by Direct Connection and Lynn Layton Chevrolet.
I think hopefully it misses. Oh my gosh.
Good evening. I'm Brad Travis, Chief Meteorologist of the WAFF 48 Storm Team. 50 years of weather. The video you just saw was taken back in May of 1995. That's the tornado that hit the Oakdale Mobile Home Park in Limestone County and then went on to do damage in Anderson Hills, that subdivision, in Madison County. The heart of the valley has seen its share of dangerous weather over the past 50 years. From the 1963 blizzard to the 1974 tornadoes, the 1989 tornado, Anderson Hills, Rainsville, Haleyville, Joppa, flooding like Aldrich Creek, the 1973 floods in Huntsville. All that has happened and more over the past 50 years. Weather is important to you, and that's why it is so important to the WAFF 48 Storm Team. Tonight, we look back over the past 50 years of weather as our television station celebrates its 50-year anniversary with you. Tornadoes, flooding, snow. You could argue the worst damage done to the Tennessee Valley has been by tornadoes. April 3rd and 4th, 1974, the super outbreak. Limestone County and Madison County are hit hard. 148 tornadoes touched down in 13 states that night. 86 people are killed in North Alabama, and damage is widespread. November 15th, 1989, a tornado drops without warning and travels down Airport Road in Huntsville. That area is demolished and 21 lives are lost. This tornado contradicts the theory that tornadoes don't hit populated areas. February 16th, 1995, Joppa, a tornado rips through this small community. More than 150 homes and a dozen businesses are destroyed near Joppa and in Arab. 6 people die, 130 are hurt. May 18th, 1995, this tornado starts in Limestone County, hits a trailer park killing 1 person, moves on to Anderson Hills subdivision in Madison County, 21 homes destroyed, 39 homes damaged, 10,000 without power in Madison County. April 22nd, 1997, Rainsville. The tornado is 220 yards wide and on the ground for only 5 miles. 63 homes and 36 businesses damaged. 10 people hurt. November 24th, 2001, Haleyville. A tornado touches down at 11:21 in the morning. It's 70 yards wide. Hits the downtown area and damaging many businesses. 13 people hurt. 24 tornadoes total reported in Alabama on that single day. November 10th, 2002, the heart of the valley responds when our neighbors lose 12 people to a tornado. Many of you give to help the people of Carbon Hill in Walker County, help them get back on their feet. June 28th, 1999, Aldrich Creek. Hundreds of homes are damaged when the creek rises above its banks. August 10th, 2001, Arab. A father and son are caught in dangerous floodwaters. Their car is washed away and they hang onto a tree until they are rescued. May 6, 2003, heart of the valley. More than 7 inches of rain within 2 days closed businesses, destroys crops, and leaves families homeless. New Year's Eve, 1963, a blizzard moves into the valley, dropping over 17 inches of snow in Huntsville and over 19 inches in Florence. March 12th and 13th, 1993, a snowstorm of record proportions blasts across Alabama with more than a foot of snow in a band from Birmingham northeast to DeKalb and Cherokee counties. Every square inch of North Alabama got some measurable snowfall. The storm causes power outages and brings travel to a standstill. 14 people are dead in Alabama from exposure. There have been many other weather events here in the heart of the valley, but when you remember weather, these are the events that keep coming up again and again. To mark our 50th anniversary, we decided to go back and talk to some of the meteorologists and forecasters who played a key role in weather coverage over the past 50 years. Joining us for our discussion about the 50 years of weather, some faces you will remember. WAFF 48 Storm Team meteorologist Jeff Castle introduces you to our panel.
Glenn Bracken started working for the station when it was still known as WYUR.
I actually responded to an ad at what was then WYUR 48 as a news photographer. And I started out in news and working the crime beat and chasing Dick Van Valkenburg all over the Tennessee Valley.
Glenn worked at the station from 1975 to 76. He left the valley to work in television in a few other cities, but returned in 1978. Glenn's move to the weather office was, you might say, sudden.
It came up one afternoon about 3:30. Paul doesn't want to do weather anymore. You're the new weather guy. You start tonight at 6. So that's how that started.
Glenn worked at the station until 1984. He witnessed the changeover from WYUR to WAFF. Glenn may be best known for being the first weather forecaster in North Alabama to do outdoor weather.
Number one, we had people come out and watch the weather live, and they'd either throw things at us. Sometimes we got flashed, we got shot at a couple of times, and bottle-rocketed on several occasions. And if it snowed, we got snowballed.
Bob Barron was the chief meteorologist for WAFF from 1987 to 1993. Bob originally worked in radio and came to the Tennessee Valley to be program director for a group of radio stations. He made the transition to television weather forecasting and quickly took over the weather department for WAFF. He left WAFF to work in the WAAY weather department, and after that, he started his own company.
And then, as like an old soldier, I didn't retire and I wasn't fired. I just kind of faded away. Faded away. You haven't faded a lot, Doc.
Bob is known for his work in advancing weather technology through his company, Barron Services. But you might know him best for one particular phrase.
Weather in Motion, what was that about?
Well, Weather in Motion went back to the early days when everything we did was with maps on the wall. And in order to get a lot of information in a short period of time, we'd have pre-produce a bunch of plates that went over whole U.S. maps, and they would fade back and forth between these two maps. And we'd be underneath moving plates, so it would go back and forth. But it would allow us to go through a forecast showing upper level winds, surface features, a whole bunch of things. And we started calling it Weather in Motion or Weather in Motion.
There you go.
And it kind of caught on over the years.
But you were in motion, too.
John Malone's interest in weather started very early.
I was a little boy when I watched Glenn Bracken and Bob Barron.
Thanks, John. Thanks a lot.
Do the weather on television.
Seriously, John got his start in radio, but his fascination for weather led him to television. John worked with Bob Barron at WAFF 48 as part of the weather team. He was responsible for the weekend weather from 1990 to 1993.
It was a great time to learn the ropes about TV weather because there was so much technology. Rapid development. Bob's company was in its infancy back in those days, and I got to be in on the leading edge of that.
Gerald Miller never worked at WAFF, but he is a very important part of the history of weather in the Tennessee Valley. Gerald invested 24 years with the National Weather Service office in Huntsville.
Retired in '94 for about 36 hours and went to work as a meteorologist and part of the morning team at WDRM Radio. I've been there 10 years, and I'm hoping that some of you out there at least listen to us every day.
All right.
Thank you.
Jay Prater headed up the WAFF 48 storm team from 1993 until 2000. Jay helped develop the severe weather plan we operate under today. He's from Alabama, and his memories of weather are from a very early age.
Clearly, for me, it was growing up. It was the evening of April 3rd, 1974. I was in 4th grade, scared out of my wits, growing up in suburban Birmingham, and I remember listening to WAPI radio, AM 1070, as they had reports of a thunderstorm developing a strong hook echo near Columbus, Mississippi. Then later, a tornado warning was issued for Marion County, Alabama, for Fayette County, Alabama. And that F5 storm continued to track through the Bankhead Forest. The reports about Ewan being destroyed that night started to come in, and that continued to move all the way through the Tennessee Valley before it dissipated, I think, just shy of the Tennessee border, if not just north of the Tennessee border. So really, it was the super outbreak the night of April 3rd and 4th, 1974, that weather really scared me, and that's when I decided to confront my fears and start to learn more about the weather.
Jeff Castle, WAFF 48 storm team.
So where are they now? Glenn Bracken is a project manager for International Diesel in Huntsville. Bob Barron owns Barron Services, a company dedicated to advancing weather technology. John Malone is the morning host for Light 96.9. Gerald Miller is part of the morning team at WDRM. And Jay Prater is now the chief meteorologist at KAKE-TV in Wichita, Kansas. Coming up a little later, we'll tell you where some more of your favorite weather forecasters are, including Pam Carlton, H.D. Bagley, and Roy Acklin. It's known as the super outbreak. 148 tornadoes in 13 states covered over 2 days. It began April 3rd, 1974, and didn't let up until April 4th. 86 people were killed in North Alabama. The damage was worst across Limestone and Madison counties. As WAFF 48 storm team meteorologist Heath Morton shows us, the devastation of the 1974 tornadoes taught us a lot of lessons.
Weather in.
When Bob Barron arrived in the valley in 1975, the scars of 1974 were still visible.
We used to drive up and you could see the twisted trees for several years after the event.
On April 3rd, tornadoes ripped across Alabama, leaving 86 people dead and hundreds hurt.
The TV stations in Huntsville did cover that tornado. It was the first time I ever remembered seeing that kind of coverage on television. H.D. Bagley was mentioned. He was on the air. I remember Adrian Gibson being someone else that was on the air covering this storm and its aftermath. That made an impression on me, and I think it was the beginning of the sophistication in this market with its weather coverage, because there was obviously a need for better weather coverage.
Glenn Bracken remembers television weather departments being unprepared for tornadoes like that.
You have to put it in the context of the time. Number one, TV stations didn't have weather departments. They had one person usually covering weather. We didn't have weather radio on the air yet. Gerald put that on the tall tower at 48 and 76, I believe.
Right, January 76.
We didn't have the weather warning capabilities. We did have a fairly good spotter network at that time, reporting to the National Weather Service, where they could direct their attention to the radar and put out the teletype warnings, which would then go to the TV stations and radio stations. But we didn't have the technology to put out warning, certainly as well as we do now.
But, you know, putting it in a little better perspective, you know, we didn't start issuing tornado warnings until 1950. So this was only 24 years later that we had this outbreak. So yes, the issuance of warning was still a new thing. The technology was not there. And like Glenn said, it did bring about an awareness to this area that has never been here before. And like when I was growing up, you know, we had the little storm shelters out in the country. Everybody would dig a hole back in an embankment, and you run out to it at 2 o'clock in the morning and spend 30 minutes getting the snakes and the spiders out of it before you're brave enough to go in. And then sometimes the snakes would win. You just stand outside and take your chances.
Gerald says storm shelters started springing up all over the Tennessee Valley, even in areas you had never seen them before.
That has brought about the development of much better storm shelters, and people actually getting more interested in putting them in their homes. Now, you know, I'm a big scaredy cat myself, and I have a storm shelter at my house that weighs 44,000 pounds. It's buried in the ground, 12 yards of 4,000 PSI concrete. It holds 15 people. and I really don't think there's going to be a tornado blow it away.
Heath Morton, WAFF 48 Storm Team.
November 15th, 1989. A tornado drops out of the sky from nowhere with no warning. I'm WAFF 48 News anchor Mark Thornhill. Bob Barron says November 15th, 1989 was just right for severe weather, so he knew the potential was there. Bob and his wife Phyllis were driving on Airport Road earlier in the day. Phyllis went to play tennis. Bob went to work. When the tornado hit, he was worried.
And she called to say that she and the dog had gotten into the closet, and that we actually lived only about 200 yards off of the tornado track, and that she was okay and the dog was okay. And by that time, I'm so involved in everything else, it was, yeah, sure, talk to you later. And,
oh, yeah, I know how that goes.
And you didn't realize the full depth, the whole breadth of this event until, gosh, 1 o'clock in the morning or so when I finally tried to drive home.
Glenn Bracken found himself outside when the storm hit.
I was actually changing a headlight on Jordan Lane on my wife's car under the awning of a closed gas station. We could actually see the cloud out to the southwest over the arsenal. And I said, this doesn't look good. And before we could get in the car, the wind picked up significantly with a very strong gust, and the wind just started pelting down. By the time we got in the house, we were soaked, and the coverage was on the air that the tornado had hit.
Gerald Miller was at the National Weather Service office, and he said the tornado came out of nowhere. They had downgraded the warning to a severe thunderstorm warning with the caveat that a tornado can form at any time during severe weather.
We didn't really realize what was happening, but the line, that squall line, kept catching up with this supercell, and all of a sudden they touched, and when they touched, it was an insurgence of energy from that line into that supercell that literally exploded it. A tornado came out of it, and I'm not really positive, even if we had Doppler radar at that time, if we would have been able to see it, because maybe if you were looking at the screen at the exact moment it happened, but I don't know if we would have been able to detect it with enough advance warning to get the warnings out. And by the time anybody knew about it, it was in the populated area, and there's nothing we can do. We did get out a warning about 3 or 4 minutes after it touched down, but by that time it's too late.
The deaths and injuries hit close to home.
The family on my street was actually in the car that you saw on the news or in the paper that was on top of the telephone pole. That was some folks on my street up in northwest Huntsville in Ardmore State subdivision, and they were horribly injured. One of the kids was sucked out through the T-top of the car.
And any injury, much less loss of life, is something that hits home.
And that's when Bob Barron started looking at ways to improve weather warning systems. It's also an unforgettable image for John Malone.
This F4 tornado plowed right through the center of the residential and business area of Huntsville. The city had seen tornadoes before, the region certainly has, but for something to impact that many people, for us to see that level of loss of life and injury and the damage, which just looked like a major bomb exploded right in the middle of Airport Road, that's an image I'll never forget.
And Bob says, just like in 1974, this tornado brought about change.
The initial response, or the initial effort that was expended, I think you're seeing the results of even now, was that 15 years later. The community banded together and came up with the money to upgrade the local National Weather Service office from a conventional radar to a Doppler radar.
Mark Thornhill, WAFF 48 News. Coming up next on 50 Years of Weather, remembering the Anderson Hills tornado, Joppa, and the twister that hit Rainsville. But first,
I'm Liz Hurley, looking back at the 50 years of weather in the heart of the valley, and joining me now are the Vinsons here from Huntsville. Mr. Vinson, you've been here for almost 18 years, and you've got quite a tale to tell about the '89 tornado.
Yes, I have. I said my grandson went down there to help him out on Airport Road, and I said, man alive, I wouldn't go down there tall. And then I saw he didn't have his shoes on, so I made him come back and put his shoes on.
And think of all the people he helped.
I should say so. I think it was great, but I would have been scared to death.
thing's on the ground. It's on the ground.
Homes and lives torn apart. The people who live in the Oakdale Mobile Home Park in Limestone County and the residents of the Anderson Hills subdivision in Madison County will never forget May 18th, 1995. WAFF 48 News anchor Kimberly Essex takes us back to that massive storm.
This rarely seen video of the tornado that marched across Limestone and Madison counties is breathtaking. The twister also hit Meridianville, New Market, and Harvest. In Harvest, the worst hit neighborhood was Anderson Hills.
It's unrealistic. I mean, I've been in tornadoes before, but this is the first time ever touched me personally.
Some were caught in the worst place, their cars.
Well, I was down the road about a mile, and I seen the winds, looked just like a tornado. Pulled over to the side of the road, jumped in the ditch, seen the tornado go over.
And some were just in their homes, caught off guard.
I was in my room watching the video, and I saw trees uprooting behind me. So I immediately went downstairs, my mother and I, and less than about 10 seconds later, it was over.
And when it was all over, more than 21 homes were destroyed and 31 homes had major damage. Kim Essex, WAFF 48 News.
One life was lost in the Oakdale Mobile Home Park. 26 homes were destroyed and 9,500 people were without power in Limestone County. Joppa, Alabama, another community that's no stranger to tornadoes. They know what tornado damage looks like. February 16th, 1995, a tornado ripped through Joppa. 6 people were killed, 130 were hurt, and more than 150 homes and a dozen businesses were destroyed near Joppa and in Arab. One of those damaged buildings was Joppa United Methodist Church. This is what was left of the Sunday school building. The church was able to rebuild, but the members will never forget February 1995. Our next tornado was 220 yards wide and on the ground for 5 miles. In Rainsville, 63 homes and 36 businesses were damaged and 10 people were hurt. This all happened April 22nd, 1997. Here's WAFF 48 News anchor Liz Hurley.
Because, at that time we didn't really know, we knew it was something, we didn't know it was a tornado because, like I said, the tornado siren didn't go off.
Most of Rainsville was caught off guard by this unwelcome visitor. Wow, you can still see some signs of
stockroom roof, the black top of it came off and went down into where the back kitchen of the door is there, and then when we have a little awning right there, it went in through there.
More than a decade later, the signs of destruction were fading, but the stories of survival linger on.
We went into the hallway there in the office. There's a little hallway there, where there's a bunch of walls and everything around us and everything, and that's where we stayed, us, and we had about 3 or 4 customers in the building. We all got there until it was over with.
Hardest hit, downtown.
Here where we're standing is where our fire station was, and it was totally destroyed. But I guess my first reaction was just unbelievable. I mean, you didn't know how we were ever going to get it cleaned back up.
But they did, through the generosity of some other storm survivors.
Like the city of Fort Payne, and matter of fact, the city of Huntsville sent several vehicles over here, and if it hadn't been for that, we never would have got back.
Liz Hurley, WAFF 48 News.
The next tornado didn't hit the valley, but it did hit our hearts. Nearly 1 year to the date of those 24 tornadoes that touched down in Alabama, 12 people died in the town of Carbon Hill. It happened on November 10th, 2002. More than 50 people were hurt by an F3 tornado that touched down. Dozens of businesses were damaged or destroyed. The Carbon Hill Elementary and Junior High schools were casualties of this storm. Teachers tried to salvage what they could. And this is where you came in. When we held our WAFF Neighbors in Need telethon a week after the tornado hit, you gave from your heart. $30,000 was raised during the telethon to help with the rebuilding process. Up next, we continue our walk down memory lane. How many of you remember these incredible pictures? Flooding and its clash with North Alabama. We'll take a look back at the recent floods of May 2003. We'll also remember a tense flash flood rescue and a record snowfall, the blizzards of 1963 and 1993. But first,
Liz Hurley back with you on 50 years of remembering weather here in the heart of the valley. And joining me now is Mr. Keel from Huntsville. And tell me, Larry, a little bit about some of the memories that you have. You have 2 very striking and important memories about 2 separate tornadoes.
The tornado in '74
My dad lost either 7, 8, or 9, or 10 of his friends, lived in the adjoining counties in the area and their families. And in 1989, a friend of mine named John Taylor and his wife were killed in the '89 tornado. He had moved to Huntsville, I believe, from Mobile, and he has not been up here that long. And he was part of the group of people that got killed in that '89 tornado. In fact, I would have been in it. I was fixing dinner to go down to a friend of mine's house in South Huntsville, and I got delayed. Our power went out, and as I started to leave, just as I started to leave, I heard the tornado sirens go off. And when they went off, I stopped, and then when I stopped, my power went out, and then that's when I saw the tornado moving through the clouds. I could see it from Montesano just as clear as a bell. It was moving through the area, but I never realized it was that bad. But I learned the next day how many of my friends got killed, and I was pretty sad about that.
These are incredible pictures from the spring floods of 2003. It was May and the rain started pouring. Many were forced from their homes, racing to find higher ground. Cars were covered with water, parking lots became small ponds. Rainfall totals reached more than 10 inches in some locations. It was a flood many will remember. I don't think there was a part of the valley that wasn't touched by the deluge of water. The folks who live in the Fisher Street apartments in Lacey's Spring are probably still telling stories about the day their home became waterlogged. WAFF 48 News anchor Melissa Meager takes a look back.
This beaver will be the only one staying at Fisher Street apartments tonight. He swims through what used to be the parking lot. All day, these people packed, loaded, and watched the rising water.
Just a long night watching it keep coming up in the parking lot, wondering how far it's going to get.
They could blame the overflowing Tennessee River. If you think this water is deep now, can you imagine it's expected to rise another 1.5 feet by the end of the day?
We're advising people to take all their precious things and put them out of harm's way.
The apartment owner rented moving trucks, gathered boxes, and is offering motel rooms at one of his other businesses.
We're just, real sorry that we can't do more, but this is all we can do.
We put her name on a waiting list, but they said that all the rooms are full right now, so we don't know where we're going right now.
Judy Putzier just hopes she got all of her important things out.
There's a lot of confusion because you never know what to take, I don't think. I've never done this before.
You get the things that's most important to you, and you take those, and the rest you leave.
Most people packed away pictures, old books, and letters. They left the heavy stuff behind, setting it on top of cinder blocks, hoping it stays dry.
I hope my insurance will pay.
It was a day John Malone also remembers well. John was working the morning show on Light 96.9 that morning.
I'm hearing my reporters tell me that there's flooding in the city of Huntsville. John, you won't believe this. And until I turned on my TV monitor and saw the live pictures coming from the Parkway and the Market Square parking lot and cars stranded and how quickly this happened, it's just another example. Of course, the Aldridge Creek disaster of a few years back.
Speaking of Aldridge Creek, that's another incredible flood that many will remember. Hundreds of homes and businesses were damaged when the Huntsville Creek came out of its banks on June 28, 1999. The torrential rains and fast-moving water even washed away cars. The city of Huntsville bought many of the homes that were flooded so they could widen the creek bed and hopefully prevent future floods there. Dennis Leftwich and his son Denny held onto this tree for an hour in Arab while rescuers tried to reach them. The men were driving along a county road when a huge river of water slammed into their car. They soon found themselves swimming in floodwaters. Rescuers got to Denny and Dennis by boat and got them to safety. Snow is one of the most difficult weather events to forecast. We've heard stories the forecasters in 1963 were only calling for about 1 to 2 inches of the white stuff. Let's take a look at the superstorm of 1993. Tornadoes, snow, you name it. It happened with this storm in 1993. The storm hit on March 12th and 13th. The superstorm of 1993 started with tornadoes in Florida, 15 of them. There was a 12-foot storm surge also right along the Florida Panhandle. Then the storm started putting down snow. Gerald Miller was forecasting for the National Weather Service at the time, and he saw it coming.
the fact that we had a blizzard of that magnitude in March, I think March the 12th and 13th of 1993, that was something that was way out of the ordinary, and we saw it coming. Nobody believed us when we said it was coming. And as a matter of fact, the couple of hours before the snow actually hit, the airport manager out at Huntsville International Airport still did not believe me. And I just kept telling him, wait, 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 and you'll see. And sure enough, about 8:30 that night, it started coming in, and by midnight, it was a whiteout.
The snowstorm of record proportions blasted Alabama and southern Tennessee with more than a foot of snow in a band from Birmingham, northeast of DeKalb and Cherokee counties. Every square inch of North Alabama and southern Tennessee got some measurable snowfall out of the storm. The storm also caused power outages and brought travel to a standstill. The superstorm of 1993 was actually a very well forecasted event. Meteorologists started warning people as early as 5 days out. You'll want to stay with us as we take a look back at the weather technology over the past 50 years. From the old weather teletype and magic markers on plexiglass to today's Doppler radar and storm tracking, the life of weather technology has zoomed at a record pace. But first,
Liz Hurley, going back in time over the last 50 years of covering weather in the Tennessee Valley, and joining me now is Lance George, who remembers 30 years ago in the 74 tornadoes. They really hit North Alabama hard, hit Limestone County, and hit Huntsville.
They were awful. I remember we had a car storage building out near Ryland, and went out to check it the next morning, found out it had been pretty much demolished, and every building within a quarter mile was probably demolished.
forecasters over the past 50 years described their weather technology as primitive compared to what we have today. Doppler radar, NEXRAD, and storm tracking are recent tools of the trade when it comes to forecasting weather. So how did forecasters share the weather story with you back then? We ask our panelists. WAFF 48 News anchor Mark Thornhill has that story.
Glenn Bracken forecasted weather at WAFF in the 70s.
We had a loop provided with the network feed every afternoon, a very grainy, very poor black and white image, which was probably at least 10 or 12 hours old, I guess. But some of the changes were we actually drew our maps on plexiglass on a wall-mounted board in the studio with magic marker, and you had to use some really harsh chemicals to erase them every day. This is before you had dry erase markers, young folks out there. We had a National Weather Service teletype machine that printed out the weather forecast zones and all the hourly obs and everything like that. Wow. And then we had what we called a facsimile machine. Not like the one you're used to. This thing was as big as a stove. Mm-hmm. It took a roll of wet chemically treated paper about that long and about that big around, and it had a helix blade in it that actually burnt the wet chemical in the paper to create a map for your national observations and your front locations and your weather systems that were going to affect your weather at some time. So you actually took that off this machine and hung it on the wall to let it dry. We didn't have a radar. The joke in the studio was before every newscast, I'd go stand outside and put my finger on my nose and go and be the radar for the station. We did get radar next. The other stations had an antiquated aircraft black and white radar, small, short range. Another station with the weather god of the Tennessee Valley, Mr. H.D. Bagley, who I had the privilege to get to know well. Had a large full-scale enterprise radar unit at the time, but then we were the first to get the color digital remote weather from the actual display at the National Weather Service, which gave it to us in real time exactly what they were seeing for severe weather predicting and forecasting, which was a great benefit.
WAFF did get a radar in the late 70s when the station became WAFF. It was the first color digital radar remote from the National Weather Service. Glenn says despite their drawbacks in technology, they still had a strong accuracy rate.
And then from what we had then, which I think you would have to call primitive, but effective, you guys ran about an 85% accuracy rate on your forecast. Mm-hmm. We ran almost that on severe weather prediction, I think. Mm-hmm. And we were pleased to represent them in their putting their weather information on the air for the Tennessee Valley.
John Malone came to WAFF in the late 80s and worked through the early 90s. On the heels of the November 1989 tornado, the development of technology exploded.
It was really a time of transformation from the days that Glenn discusses of the markers on plexiglass. We were really getting into the computer era early on. Bob had this vision. He saw the possibilities, inspired by a horrible event that occurred here.
Bob Barron did go on to found Barron Services, and his commitment is to getting weather information and warnings to the people in harm's way sooner, thus saving lives. But another somewhat simple invention also meant a world of difference for forecasting weather.
The biggest, greatest invention for weather forecasting has been computers. I mean, I can sit in the comfort of my home now with 2 computers and do what I did back 30, 40 years ago when I first started in this business. It would have taken me 8 hours, or taken a staff of 12 or 13 people, 8 hours to do what I can do now in 1 hour in my home with 2 computers.
What did we do before computers and fax machines? Mark Thornhill, WAFF 48 News.
So where are we now? Well, weather technology has definitely come a long way. Now we're able to get warnings to you sooner and give you more time to prepare. WAFF 48 News anchor Kimberly Essex tells you how.
Bob Barron has led the way when it comes to advances in weather technology. His company, Barron Services, provides weather equipment used by television stations all over the country and even in other parts of the world.
The advent of NextRads, particularly sensor networks, the application of Doppler information, which tells us motion of the winds, as well as standard radar information, which tells us intensities, combined to provide additional products that help us to pinpoint what's happening, where it's going, telling who's going to be affected, and being able to get the message out to those in harm's way.
At WAFF, we keep you and your family safe using a number of tools. Live Doppler 48 radar is key in that effort. Doppler radar shows us where severe weather is developing and where tornadoes are forming. This is vital information so you know if your neighborhood is in the path of a storm. We also use WAFF 48 Storm Tracker. Storm Tracker lets you know when the severe weather will reach your city or town down to the minute. Viper takes our meteorologists inside the storm, and it's looking for tornadoes all the time. Plus, we have a team of 4-degree meteorologists on staff. Bob Barron.
We've done a lot of technological advances over time, but the technology is nothing if there isn't really concentrated effort by you folks in the media to get that information to the public. And the job that you, and you I mean plural, are doing these days is head and shoulders above what we were able to do years ago.
The WAFF 48 Storm Team is taking advantage of those advances to keep you safe during severe weather. Kim Essex, WAFF 48 News.
Other important advances to mention are NextRad Doppler radar. The recent Doppler radar we added to Jackson County and WAFF Live Doppler 48 radar now allow us to have complete detail on every storm that moves across the heart of the valley. As far as storm detail goes, we're able to storm track and go in street level, which allows us to zoom into your street or your neighborhood and let you know when severe weather threatens. Coming up next, where are they now? We'll tell you where some of your favorite weather forecasters are and what they're doing. Memories of broadcasting weather in the heart of the valley. Pam Carlton, Roy Acklin, and H.D. Bagley. What did they decide to do once they left the airwaves in the heart of the valley? We'll tell you next, but first.
Liz Hurley looking back on 50 years of weather here in the Tennessee Valley, and joining me now is Eddie Hicks, who's been EMA director in 2 counties in North Alabama, Colbert County as well as now Morgan County. Yep. You have a lot of weather memories, particularly one that happened back in the 90s.
Yep, what happened was that the Weather Service called Colbert County, because we were the first one that the storm would be coming into, and asked us if we had any spotters that could watch this storm because it really looked bad. So we deployed spotters, and it happened to be a daytime storm. And actually, we tracked it all the way across the county, and it fortunately didn't do much damage in Colbert County, but that's the one that went on into Limestone, hit Anderson Hills, and then went on into Madison County and did damage there.
Pam Carlton began her career at WAFF as a weekend weather forecaster. She then went on to become an award-winning anchor and reporter. She focused on political reporting and later became the WAFF medical reporter for a decade. She also anchored the WAFF weekend newscast with her husband Robert Lane during the mid-1980s. Pam returned to weather in the late 80s to spend more time with her family. Pam and her husband started a public relations firm after leaving WAFF. She is now a national book editor and travels across the country doing a job that feeds her passion for writing. Pam lives in the heart of the valley with her husband Robert and her son Harrison.
He is considered to be one of the best-known meteorologists in the heart of the valley. HD was one of the first 2 meteorologists in the entire country recognized by a national meteorological organization. He retired in 1979. One little known fact about HD is that he served with the U.S. Navy during World War II and was awarded the Purple Heart 60 years after being released from service. H.D. Bagley is now 87 years old and lives in the heart of the valley with his wife. Roy Ackland forecasted weather from 1984 until 1986. He started his career in 1958 in Waco, Texas. Roy moved from Texas to Huntsville to work at WAFF, and he also served 4 years in the Air Force. So where is Roy now? Well, he's still a weather forecaster, but he's now in High Point, North Carolina with WGHP Fox 8. Roy has been there for 17 years. He forecasts weather for their 3-hour morning newscast and also produces a segment called Roy's Folks. In these stories, Roy looks for ordinary people who do extraordinary things. He won an Emmy Award for his work, and that's where Roy Ackland is now. Coming up next, we want to share with you some of our firsts in weather technology.
Liz Hurley looking back in time at the big weather events in the heart of the valley over the last 50 years. One particularly back in 1989 that affected Henry Brink. Henry, we're here at Trinity United Methodist Church. You were a stone's throw away at your house.
That's right, at 118 Westbury Drive. And the tornado hit just as I drove into my driveway. I saw the big black cloud, and then it hit. I couldn't even get out of the car. Sucked the windows in on my car, did considerable damage to the house, but my wife was inside. Everything was A-OK except for the damage.
Weather technology is key to keeping you and your family safe. The WFF 48 Storm Team has always been on the cutting edge when it comes to the latest technology. We want to tell you now about all the firsts WFF 48 News has brought to you over the past 50 years. West of Athens, and it continues to push. As we close tonight and start thinking about the future of weather technology, it's always good to look back and see how far we've come. Glenn Bracken witnessed the changes at WAFF television from the middle 70s to the early 80s.
But we did get a radar, I guess, in 78, 79 when we became WAFF. And it was the first color digital radar remote from the National Weather Service, where I got to meet Gerald back in the mid-70s, almost 30 years ago, I hate to say. But some of the biggest changes I got to take part in, and remember that WYUR 48 was the first to have videotape cameras in the Tennessee Valley. We had old one-gun JVCs. They were about as big as a case of Coda. Then about 2 years later, when WFF came and took over, we graduated well up to, I think it was a 4-gun TK-76, which was a major improvement in broadcast quality for video and stuff like that. 48 was also in the WAFF days the first to have live remote capability. We had the first live trucks in the Tennessee Valley. There were a lot of firsts. I was the weathercaster when we had the first color digital weather radar remoted from the National Weather Service with the capability to access other radars in the region. So there were lots of new things going on in the market, and most of them were spearheaded by 48.
John Malone got to see the advances made from the late 80s to the early 90s.
And I was there 1990 to 1993, WAFF, the live real-time lightning detection, first station in the valley to bring you that. We were the first station to bring you live Doppler radar images from the National Weather Service. Had that on first. The storm alert, the counties that appear on the bottom of your screen, warning you of severe weather coverage.
People have always expected more from the Weather Service, from the TV stations, and WAFF responded to the November 1989 tornado by really doing some pretty revolutionary things during my period of time as a part of the weather team. We had real-time lightning detection. The first time this type of information was ever made available to TV stations, live real-time lightning detection. We had that. We were the first station to bring it to you.
The bar has always been set high. H.D. Bagley did it back in the early 60s. When other markets had the clown of the station do the weather report, we had meteorologists on the air doing the weather report in Huntsville. That bar was set high. We have benefited. We have prospered from that, and lives have been saved because of it.
And we're not done yet. The WAFF 48 Storm Team is committed to severe weather coverage and having the best technology to keep you safe at all times. Bob Barron, Jay Prater, Glenn Bracken, John Malone, and Gerald Miller all want to thank you so much for taking part of the WAFF 48 Storm Team Road Tour, and also a big thank you to the Trinity United Methodist Church who allowed us to use their facility. Good night, everyone, and remember, the WAFF 48 Storm Team is your safest place in severe weather.